a lot of flack to him because I've said, like, when USC joins the Big Ten, it's going to be a whole different ordeal. It's going to be a lot tougher. So I'm not really expecting it to be a really smooth transition. But obviously USC fans, you included, like, no, we're going to be just fine. But I feel like the schedule's tough but manageable. But what are you? Because for me, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing like maybe 8-4 ish, maybe 9-3. But what are you? What do you feel like would be a good first season for USC, like record wise?
So I can cheat again. Like I always told people, you can hedge this easily and say 9-3. That's a safe bet, right? Because I think that's the most likely scenario, given the fact that we don't know anything about this defense. I mean, we know what we believe it's going to be. It's just going to hinge. I think that the offensive line could be good to great. I think that the defense would be good to great. If we get great and great, then you're looking at 11-1, you know, or who knows what they could do. If we're looking at good and good, yeah, maybe you're looking more towards 8-4, 9-3. But what I want to see is good. What I want to see is solid. What I want to see is a team. What I want to see is improvement. What I want to see is not only improvement from last year to this year, but I mean, you know, from week 1 to week 2, from week 2 to week 3, you know, again, a lot like we saw in 2001 with Pete Carroll when they go 6-6. But every week it was these, you know, it was these tight games and culminated with shutting out UCLA. I mean, that's the kind of season that I want to see from USC. Now, granted, we don't have Sonny Bird at tailback, but you get what I'm saying. Is that you want the team to get better. You want to show improvement. I don't think this pressure. Everyone thinks that Lincoln Riley's under a kind of hot seat. They're saying Lincoln Riley's on. I think it's absurd. I think that you need, for positive momentum in recruiting, all they need to do is show recruits this year that what they've established for a staff is going to be sufficient to one, be competitive and get to the playoffs, two, get to the NFL. I'm very confident about the second one, and I'm very confident about the first one, but is how well will they be able to do that in 1 year, in the first year of this defense is going to be the wild card. Matt, what are your thoughts?
So right now I'm at 9-3 for USC. I think that, you know, USC needs to be 9-3 to think that this is going in the right direction. But one always has to make the allowance for, you know, the improbable. You know, maybe you play a great game and you still somehow lose. You know, that could happen. So if USC's 8-4, but like a couple of its losses are absolute classics, you know, I'll allow for that kind of exception. But on balance, need to be 9-3, hope to be 10-2. LSU's the pivot point, and you know, assuming if USC does win the LSU game, and I'm not counting on that, but like USC definitely has a chance, then the next really, really big game is that Penn Stater on October 12th, and then we'll see if USC can be 10-1 heading into the Notre Dame game, or if USC is 9-2 and needs that Notre Dame game at the very end to get to 10-2. And of course, if USC gets to 10-2 with this schedule, it will be in the playoffs. So 9-3 really is my baseline expectation for this team. And, you know, people ask me, which games will USC lose? Michigan and Notre Dame. And then here's the thing, like, this is what part of why, you know, 10-2 is a possibility. I can't really tell you exactly where that third loss is going to come from, but I just think that depth, some injuries, some attrition at some point along the line are probably going to trip this team up. Like, I don't feel confident in saying they're going to lose to Penn State because I'm not sold on Penn State's offense. I actually think USC has a pretty decent chance against Penn State, but there might be just one game that just doesn't work really well. I've noted that the Maryland game, we don't have an announced kickoff time for that game, but that is probably going to be a noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific game, probably on Big Ten Network, because you have the Rutgers Friday night game next week. So you're probably not going to play a late Saturday game before a Friday game. That's probably going to be on October 19 in College Park, an early game. So like that could be one of those body clock ambush type situations. Again, I'm not predicting USC to lose that, but like that is a potential landmine to look out for. But I think that 9-3 is really, you know, like if USC at least reaches that, then you can really sell the NFL development, the improved defense, the other things that the program has in its favor. You know, the practice field just opened up, the new practice field with that fresh turf. there are a lot of things moving in the right direction. If USC goes 9-3, I think there's a general sense that the program will be moving forward and there will be positive vibes going into 2025. But if it's 7-5 or 8-4, man, then it's going to be a really, really rough scene around here.
One thing last year, like everyone talks about, USC losing 5 games in year 2, but let's take a look at, and I'm not making excuses, and believe me, the defense, it was clear the team was just, was having issues on the offensive line and the defense as a whole. But like usually when you hear other teams, they always make concessions for them, because really, when you really look at last season, USC lost to, well, let's look at them. They lost to Washington by single digits, right? They lost to Oregon by 9. And then the games that really were rough were the 2 games against UCLA and Notre Dame, where USC was only able to score 20 points in both those games. Well, we went and we took the defensive coordinator that held us to 20 points in that game. And again, the thing with Notre Dame is they really were ready for Caleb Williams. They just kind of unleashed on him. He was unable to roll out. They really had a great game plan for him and just really bottled him up. So the way people talked about that 5-loss season, and really the way they're going to talk about USC this year. Let's say USC drops 4 games, but they lose to they lose to Penn State, or they lose to Michigan, LSU, Notre Dame. Look at USC's schedule. I'm not building in excuses. That no one on the USC football team's looking for excuses. I'm not certainly giving excuses. But if you look up and down this roster, also a couple of these games, I believe, isn't Wisconsin coming into to LA on a bye? I'm almost certain that they are. And then there's another bye game as well against teams. This is not an easy schedule. I hear what you're saying, as far as shaping up for the schedule. But anyone looking at this schedule and saying it's an easy schedule, or it's a favorable schedule, this is one of the tougher schedules USC's had in years. And that's coming off of last year, again, where we played Notre Dame, a really good Oregon team, and a really good Washington team. So the loss that really killed that team last year, and think about this, as bad as that season was that fourth quarter last drive collapse to Utah. Talk about a narrative game in and of itself, that game right there, because without that game, which they absolutely should have won, without that game and making the pig farmer look like John Elway coming down the field for set up a winning field goal, without that game, now you're talking about going 9-4 and a big win in a playoff with that defense. And keep that in mind, you guys. We're talking right now about USC's last season and how bad the defense was. Absolutely right. That defense was really, really bad. And they still won 8 games. They still won those 8 games and really should have won 9. So even with this tough schedule, I don't think anyone needs to pull the ripcord and say, oh, shit, we're going to lose a bunch of games this year. I am not saying that. Why I say 9-3 is because I'm with you, Matt. I think this is a great team. I'll take our 22 against anybody. I really will. And we do have depth around the team. But there's certain positions and certain places, especially, again, on the defensive line, where you really need to rotate that team. I'm not talking about just late in the season, late in games. Think about in Ann Arbor. If they do decide just to pin their ears back and just run at us and just get one of those big, like, suffocating Python games where they just kind of really try to squeeze the play clock out of you and kind of cut down the possessions and really kind of just wear you down with the run game. That's where we'll see where our depth is and how these young guys can get in, provide depth. Because if they're not able to rotate those linemen, they're going to be gassed late in that fourth quarter. And we saw what happened to a talented Ohio State team when that happens and the floodgates open up in the fourth quarter. Guys are ripping off 80-yard touchdowns. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it, Jeffrey. Thank you for calling in. Anything else you want to add before you go?
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad I was able to make the show tonight. It was a blast calling in. Just to add to what you said, what both of you guys said real quick before I get off, is that the thing is like you both said, it's a tough schedule, but I feel it's manageable in a way. It's not ridiculously just impossible. But when you look at the overall, like the games and the way that they're placed, and like you said, some of the teams with the buys and everything, it's not easy either. LSU, that's the problem with week 1 games, is you just don't know how ready your team's going to be. I think it helps USC out that the game's in Las Vegas. That's a big bonus. But still, like, if you don't win that game, then already the season's starting on the wrong foot. And it stinks because a lot of times, maybe if you lose a week 1 game like that, maybe later in the year, you would have been able to beat that team. So that's a game USC, if you win that game, start on the right foot. At Michigan's tough. At Minnesota's not easy, even though Minnesota's not as good anymore right now. Penn State's hard. At Maryland's trap game. At Washington and Notre Dame, like I said, 8-4. 9-3 is what I'm seeing. Probably 9-3. I mean, the team's really, really good, but I just think that with all this realignment in general, including USC, it's just going to be interesting to see how all the teams do in the new conferences. They're playing new teams as well. Teams are not familiar with playing all the time. It's just going to be wild to see the adjustment. I think USC, having Lincoln Riley for a couple years now, trying to build that defense. The defense is the key. Being now in the Big Ten, going up against, quality teams on both sides of the ball, they need the defense to be good to keep the scores, lower scoring games. They can't have shootouts like that Cal game last year, the Arizona game, if they're going to have a good year. But I'm looking forward to seeing USC in the Big Ten. It's an exciting time for the Trojans and the conference as a whole. And I think if they have a 9-3 year, it's an overall good season for the Trojans, especially with how tough their schedule actually is. So it's going to be interesting. But thanks for letting me call in, and hope you guys have a great rest of the show.
You are very welcome. You're an Alabama fan. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm an Alabama fan from the SEC.
That's right.
Yes.
I knew that. But you do like Indiana.
I'm a grifter on that, but I do like Indiana out of the Big Ten. Yes.
I thought I remembered that. I thought I remember that. Listen, great call. Appreciate you calling in. Roll Tide, because we don't play you this year, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tim. Have a good one.
All right.
So first off, I'm just going to touch on what you spoke about like probably 20 minutes ago. I mean, in my opinion, you saying USC isn't easy, probably delusional. And I won't go any more into that. But I mean, I can't really see how anybody would think that we have an easy schedule. So
I don't think he said. Well, hang on. To be fair, Christian, I don't think he said we have an easy schedule. I think he said we have a manageable schedule, which you can see from his viewpoint. Definitely. We don't play Oregon. We don't play Ohio State. We get Penn State at home. We get Nebraska at home. We get Wisconsin at home. So I think that's what he's talking about as far as having a manageable schedule. Unfortunately, we don't get to play Purdue. We don't get to play Indiana. We don't get to play Northwestern, right? So as much as we miss and hit, it's not an easy schedule. It's a very difficult. What makes our schedule difficult is that takes over the top for me is the out of conference games that we've chosen to self-inflict upon ourselves. So
yeah, starting off with LSU and closing out with Notre Dame. I mean, those are definitely some tough matchups.
And that's why when people rip on us for saying, "Oh, you guys, your over/under is like, what is it, 7? I think 7.5, 7."
Yeah,
that's why.
I think 7.5.
If we're playing Akron and we're playing Citadel, right? Then our over/under is 9.5. Do you know what I mean? So when people want to crank on us, if you look at Ohio State's out of conference schedule, and I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, and that's how it always is. They play it easy.
No, not every year, but I mean,
all right.
Yeah, in general, yeah.
But yeah, it's favorable for them not being in a conference. They can schedule who they want, and I mean, I feel like they schedule a lot of laydowns.
Well, until this year, Michigan. I mean, look at Michigan's out of conference last year and the year before that. This year they're playing Texas, which is going to be a hell of a game. But in general, so a lot of these programs, and I'm not talking about USCC without talking about you, but I am talking about USCC. There's programs that don't schedule games that they can't take a bus to. So I mean, USC historically has done this to themselves, and I think now though they're going to have to start realizing the road to the playoffs, which is now the end all be all. It's not going to a New York Six bowl anymore. It's getting to the playoffs. You can schedule your way there. And the people worried about, but we want to play these games. You'll play those games in the play. If you make the playoffs, you're going to play 2 really, if you win, you're going to play 3-4 really good games. So that's what you got to think about going forward. It's a different type of football. You just got to think, you can't You can't look at it the way we used to look at scheduling. It's all changed. Everything is completely changed in football, and it's the way it is. And people need to catch up with that idea.